He walked into the room, and very quickly, this doctor said, "Mr. Moore, I'm sorry to inform you, but our test confirmed that you do have HIV." And I can remember turning around and looking at this window that was right in front of me, and there were like these little butterfly stickers on there. I really wish that I was one of those butterflies on the wall that could just literally get up and just fly away. What I heard the doctor say was, "Yeah, you are gonna die."
There was a thing back in the day when I talked to people and they're like more recently diagnosed, and they'd say, "I'm HIV." And I'd say to them, "No, you're not HIV. That's a virus. You are you. You have HIV. It's just part of your life. It's not who you are. It doesn't, and it should not ever affect who you are or how you think of yourself or your sense of worth." No, no.
Now let's go to the lecture and join Dr. Anthony Fauci as he talks about AIDS.
We don't know a lot about AIDS, but we also know an incredible amount about it from our experience over the past 3 or 4 years.
The majority of Americans know you now for your work with COVID-19, but less so your work with HIV/AIDS.
Just kind of ironic that I've spent 40 years of my life doing nothing. I saw this MMWR from the first week in June of 1981 that was describing 5 gay men from Los Angeles with pneumocystis pneumonia. And I remember shaking my head and saying, wow, what a fluke this is. You know, why only gay men and why pneumocystis? Then 1 month later, in July of 1981, another MMWR came, this time with 26 men. And they were not only from LA, they were from New York City and from San Francisco. That changed my life because I made a decision right there in my office. I was going to turn around my entire direction of my career and start studying these, what we thought were only gay men, bring them in and try and study their disease to see what was going on.
I arrived in New York City on the day after Independence Day in 1982, July 5th, 1982. I really wanted to be on Broadway, and I wanted to see more of the world and be a part of it all. I got here and heard people talking about it and referred to it as the gay cancer. And I thought, okay, well, what's going on here? And it still seemed, even for that first year, something removed from the world I was in. It became more frightening the further we got into it, the further we started understanding what the virus was, like around 84, 85. At that point, people were dying a lot more frequently and even more so after that. In 1992, when I got my positive diagnosis, they were still experimenting with drugs, and none of the therapies that were being prescribed were actually working.
It's a lie! It's a sham! It won't work!
I did my first AIDS ride in 95, which was like a big deal for me. I rode from Boston to New York, the whole ride. At the time, my T cells were around 400, which is pretty low. And then over the course of the next 6 months, from that September through the springtime, my T cells dropped down to below 200, and I officially had AIDS. At the very same time, the results from the 6-month study came out showing that a 3-drug combination was effective in stopping HIV, containing it. And I did that regimen 8 hours every day around the clock on an empty stomach for 3 years, which was 4,000 plus doses without missing a single one. But I knew how lucky I was. I knew how lucky I was to actually be able to do that. And so I'm really grateful. And so I did and embraced it for myself and for all the other guys who hadn't had the opportunity, you know. It's a whole lot less daunting for anyone having to start HIV meds to take 1 pill a day, as opposed to what we did back then. I've actually held guys in my arms and said, "You're gonna be okay. Don't let this define who you are, and trust that you're gonna be okay. You can still be anything and everything you wanna be."
In the 80s and the 90s, did you ever think we'd get to this point?
I can't, no. It was one big dark tunnel and there was no light at the end.
Looking at HIV today, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that HIV is still a death sentence. It's not. It is definitely something that folks can live with and live long and healthy lives. Currently in the United States, there are 1.2 million people who are living with HIV and about 38,000 new diagnoses each year. 1 in 2 Black and 1 in 4 Latinx men, gay and bisexual, will encounter HIV in their lifetime. What we're not doing is we're not having real, open, honest conversation with youth. Because we know that they are not always going to get that at home. And it should not always be just the responsibility of the parent to make sure that children or youth have access to education and knowledge around their sexual health in their bodies.
I grew up in Beaumont, Texas, which is a little country town about an hour and 15 minutes east of Houston. This is how small the town is. That's the Catholic church that we were raised in. My mom was raised there, christened there, I was christened there. And then right in front of that is the Baptist church that we joined. Our family is really religious. Growing up in the Southern Baptist Church, I often heard that attraction to the same sex is wrong, it's sinful, or I was just doomed for hell. And so that made it harder for me to accept who I was. I've always been a mama's boy. I'm the baby, and I love my mom like so much. After getting the diagnosis, and sitting there trying to process it, I immediately jumped in my car and started heading home. I just knew that I had to get home to my mom, and that was probably the longest 3.5-hour drive that I've ever taken. So all I could think was, I'm probably gonna lose my family in this moment. I was preparing myself for my mother to not want to touch me, to not want to hug me. I was preparing to happen to me what I had heard happen to so many other people. Hi, Mama.
Hi, baby.
How are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. You cooked today?
Yes. You know I did. My love for my son is never going to change. I didn't know anyone personally that had HIV or AIDS. I tell anybody, prayer works. I get on my knees so much after he came home to tell me that than I've ever been on them in my life. You want a prayer answered? You got to get on your knees or get on your face and pray. God will answer. And I know I struggled on the beginning when he was first diagnosed because I didn't know anything about it. So by me going to his doctor's appointments helped a lot. And the doctor, he explained, you cannot catch HIV if you kiss him, if you drink off a glass behind him, if you eat after him, you will not get HIV. And I always thought, oh, if he touched me, you're gonna get it. I've heard that. And he looked me straight in the face. He said, Ms. Wingate, that's a lie. And he said, with DeAndre's body, his build, and the way he works out, he said, if he takes this 1 pill a day, it's gonna take the rest of his life. He said he'll live to be 90 years old, 100 years old. He'll be just fine.
There are criminal statutes that still exist in over 30 states as it relates to the potential exposure to HIV. There are still legal hurdles when it comes to gay and bisexual men donating blood. With all the advances that we've seen with HIV treatment and testing, why do you think these legal barriers still exist?
I just think it's slow in coming to a realization and accepting the concept that undetectable equals untransmissible. That was a concept that was not backed by science until a few years ago. And it's absolutely true. I mean, if you look at tens and tens and tens of thousands of encounters sexually with people whose viral load is below detectable, there hasn't been a single transmission. So it's just going to take time for society to get their arms around that concept that a treated below level of detection person with HIV is essentially no danger to anybody under any circumstances.
I live in my truth and I walk every day in who I am. and I use the platforms that I've been given to make a difference in other people's lives.
Even after my diagnosis, I told myself I'm not gonna work in the field of HIV. I just don't see it for me. That's not what I wanted to do. And as I began to advocate even more and folks looked to me and they listened to me, I realized that I started having a passion for helping the community.
We have a duty.
And this was a perfect route and a perfect opportunity to explore a career in the field of HIV and in public health to help others.
I look at the generation now whose lives are all about activism, and I am so proud. The world's gonna be a better place because of the generation stepping up now. I see that without any reservation. Yeah, hooray. For me, the rides, like I said, has been a real celebration of life, but there's a big component of them of actually raising visibility. And it's only when I started doing these rides that I became more open to being visible about it beyond my circle of people. My thought has always been, yes, I'm alive, I'm living with this. Anybody you know who might be dealing with this can too.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.